To understand why a modern human would struggle to survive a single, ordinary day in the medieval era, we must first strip away the romanticized layers that history books and films have placed over the past. We often imagine the danger lying in great battles, or sudden plagues, or the arbitrary cruelty of a king. But the true threat to your existence would begin the moment you opened your eyes in the pre-dawn darkness. It is a darkness that you have likely never experienced in your life, a complete and total absence of light that feels heavy and suffocating, pressing against your eyes with a physical weight. In the modern world, even at night, there is always a glow, perhaps from a street lamp filtering through a curtain, or the standby light of a television, or the luminescent face of a clock. But here, in this wooden structure where you have awakened, the blackness is absolute. You would wake not to the sound of a digital alarm or the hum of distant traffic, but to a profound and unsettling silence, or perhaps the rustling of straw beneath you, or the low, rhythmic breathing of other people sleeping within inches of your body. Your first sensation would be the temperature, for unless you are sleeping directly next to the embers of a dying hearth, the air inside the house is almost exactly the same temperature as the air outside, damp and clinging to your skin. There is no thermostat to adjust, no central heating to hum into life, and the warmth you have accumulated under your rough wool blanket is the only warmth you will feel for some time. As you lie there, waiting for your eyes to adjust to a darkness that will not lift until the sun rises, you become aware of the bed itself, which is not a mattress of springs and foam, but a sack of coarse fabric stuffed with straw or dried heather. This stuffing is not static, for it shifts and compresses with every movement you make, creating hard knots and hollow depressions that leave your muscles stiff and aching before the day has even begun. Furthermore, the straw inside your mattress is not merely dried plant matter, but an ecosystem of its own, housing fleas, lice, and mites that have been feasting on you while you slept, leaving red, itching welts across your skin that you will instinctively scratch, introducing the first bacteria of the day into your bloodstream. The concept of a private bedroom is a luxury unknown to the vast majority of the population. So as you lie in the dark, you are acutely aware that you are sharing this small, enclosed space not only with your immediate family, but perhaps with livestock as well. In the winter months, animals are often brought inside the main dwelling to protect them from the frost and to add their body heat to the room, so the air is thick with the smell of wet wool, manure, and unwashed human bodies. This scent is not a temporary nuisance, but the permanent, unchangeable atmosphere of your life, a dense olfactory wall that hits you the moment you inhale. It is a smell of wood smoke that has seeped into every timber of the walls, combined with the musty odor of damp earth, for the floor beneath you is likely not wood or stone, but packed dirt. This dirt floor is hard, uneven, and perpetually cold, absorbing the chill of the ground and radiating it upward into the soles of your feet the moment you swing your legs out of the bed. If the floor is covered, it is likely strewn with rushes or straw, a layer of vegetation meant to provide insulation and absorb spills, but which often serves as a trap for food scraps, animal waste, and moisture, rotting slowly from the bottom up. You would find the simple act of standing up to be a navigational challenge, as the ceiling in a common dwelling is often low, forcing you to stoop, and the room is cluttered with the essential tools of survival: a loom, a butter churn, sacks of grain, or farm implements that become hazards in the gloom. There is no switch to flip to illuminate the room, and lighting a candle is a deliberate, calculated decision, for candles are made of tallow, rendered animal fat, which burns with a smoky, acrid smell and is too valuable to waste on mere convenience. You would likely move by touch, guiding your hands along the rough, splintery wood of the walls, feeling the texture of wattle and daub, a mixture of mud, straw, and dung that fills the gaps between the timber frame. The house itself feels alive in a way modern homes do not, creaking in the wind, drafting through invisible cracks, and allowing the sounds of the outside world to penetrate with little resistance. As you fumble for your clothes, you encounter fabrics that are heavy, stiff, and utterly unforgiving against your soft, modern skin. There is no cotton here, no smooth synthetic blends, only wool and linen, spun by hand and woven on a loom, resulting in a texture that is coarse and abrasive. The undergarments, if you wear them, are linen, which is somewhat softer, but the outer layers are thick wool, designed for durability and warmth rather than comfort, and they carry the smell of the sheep and the smoke of the hearth even after washing. Dressing yourself is a complicated process of layers, involving tunics, hose, and belts, with no zippers or elastic to aid you, only drawstrings and points, which are laces with metal tips that must be threaded through eyelets and tied securely. This clothing is heavy, adding a physical burden to your movements, and once it becomes wet, it stays wet for hours, clinging to your body and sapping your heat. You would notice, as you dress, the absence of a mirror, so you have no way to check your appearance, no way to see the grime on your face or the disarray of your hair, and soon you realize that no one else cares, for their standards of grooming are dictated by survival, not aesthetics. The water you might use to wash your face is in a bucket by the door, and it is freezing cold, having sat out all night, covered perhaps by a thin film of dust or ice. You cup this water in your hands and splash it on your face, the shock of the cold serving as your only stimulant, for there is no coffee maker gurgling in the corner, no caffeine to jumpstart your heart. The water itself is precious, fetched from a well or a nearby stream with great physical effort, and so it is used sparingly, recycled for different tasks until it is too dirty to serve any purpose. As the first gray light of dawn begins to bleed through the small, unglazed window openings, which are covered by wooden shutters or perhaps a piece of stretched, oiled cloth, you can finally see the environment that will contain your entire existence. The room is small, dark, and smoky, for the hearth is the center of the home, and without a chimney, the smoke rises to the rafters and filters out through the thatched roof, leaving a permanent haze in the air that stings your eyes and coats your lungs with soot. You might cough a deep, rattling cough that seems to be shared by everyone in the household, a symptom of living in a perpetually smoke-filled environment. The silence of the night gives way to the sounds of the morning, the crowing of roosters, the lowing of cattle, and the voices of neighbors, but these sounds are unmasked by the white noise of engines or electronics, making them feel startlingly close and distinct. Your first task before eating, before resting, before doing anything else is to tend to the fire, for if the fire goes out, relighting it is a tedious and difficult task involving flint and steel, or borrowing an ember from a neighbor. You kneel on the hard earth, blowing on the embers, feeding them small twigs and dried moss, coaxing the flame back to life with a patience that your modern mind finds infuriating. The smoke billows out into your face, burning your eyes, but you must persist, for this fire is the only source of heat for cooking and for warmth. Once the fire is established, you realize with a sinking feeling that you are intensely hungry, but there is no refrigerator to raid, no pantry stocked with ready-to-eat snacks. Breakfast is not a meal of choice but of necessity, often consisting of leftovers from the night before, perhaps a chunk of hard, stale bread or a bowl of pottage, a thick grain porridge that has been simmering in a pot for days. The bread is dense and dark, made from rye or barley, and as you bite into it, you might feel the grit of stone from the milling process grinding against your teeth, wearing down your enamel with every meal. There is no sugar to sweeten the porridge, no milk unless you have a cow that is currently lactating, and even then, the milk is likely saved for making cheese or butter, which can be stored for longer periods. You eat from a wooden bowl with a wooden spoon, or perhaps simply with your hands, wiping your mouth on your sleeve because napkins are a frivolous waste of cloth. As you swallow the bland, heavy food, you are fueling your body for a level of physical exertion that you are completely unprepared for. In the modern world, we define exercise as a separate activity, something we do for an hour at the gym, but here, physical labor is the state of being. Every calorie you consume must be earned through direct action, whether it is hauling water, chopping wood, thrashing grain, or walking miles to the nearest market. The concept of convenience does not exist. Every simple task requires a sequence of complex, physically demanding steps. If you want water, you must walk to the source, lower a bucket, haul it up, and carry the heavy weight back to the house, trying not to spill a drop. If you want heat, you must go into the woods, fell a tree, chop it into logs, haul the logs home, and split them into kindling. If you want light, you must render fat or gather rushes to dip in grease. This constant, low-level physical strain begins to wear on you immediately, your muscles protesting against movements they have never performed, your back aching from the lack of ergonomic support. And you have not even stepped outside the door yet. The threshold of the house marks the boundary between the controlled chaos of the interior and the raw, unfiltered reality of the medieval world. When you push open the heavy wooden door, the first thing that hits you is not the fresh air, but the smell of the street or the farmyard. Sanitation is a concept in its infancy, and waste disposal is a matter of tossing things out of the way, often into a midden heap or directly onto the path. The ground outside is a mixture of mud, animal dung, and rotting vegetable matter, a slippery, treacherous surface that threatens to ruin your shoes and soil your clothes with every step. You must watch where you walk constantly, scanning the ground for hazards, for a twisted ankle here is not a minor inconvenience but a potential disaster that could impede your ability to work and survive. The air outside might be fresher than the smoky interior of the hut, but it carries the scents of livestock and open latrines, a potent reminder that the separation between human and animal life is thin. As you step out, you are struck by the vastness of the sky and the dominance of the weather. In our time, we hide from the weather in climate-controlled boxes, moving from house to car to office, but here, you are fully exposed to the elements. If it is raining, you will get wet, and you will stay wet until you can return to the fire. If it is windy, the wind cuts through your wool layers and chills you to the bone. If it is sunny, there is no sunscreen, no sunglasses, only the shelter of a wide-brimmed hat if you are lucky enough to own one. You are entirely at the mercy of the environment, and your day is dictated not by a clock on the wall, but by the position of the sun in the sky. Time is not measured in minutes or seconds, but in broad strokes: dawn, mid-morning, high noon, afternoon, dusk. You do not rush to catch a train or meet a deadline, but you feel a different kind of pressure, the pressure of daylight hours slipping away, the knowledge that every hour of light must be used to secure the necessities of life before the darkness returns. This reliance on natural light affects your psychology, creating a sense of urgency during the day and a forced passivity at night. As you stand there in the mud, shivering in the morning air, looking out at a landscape devoid of power lines, cell towers, or paved roads, the isolation begins to sink in. You are cut off from the global network of information and communication that has been your lifeline since birth. There is no way to call for help, no way to check the news, no way to know what is happening in the next village, let alone the next country. Your world has shrunk to the distance you can walk in a day, and the only people you will ever know are the ones standing right in front of you. This is the beginning of your day, a day that will demand more resilience, more strength, and more endurance than any day you have lived before, and you are only just crossing the threshold. The psychological toll of this silence, this isolation, and this relentless physical discomfort is the first barrier to your survival. You are accustomed to constant stimulation, to the dopamine hits of screens and notifications. But here, there is only the slow, repetitive rhythm of survival. Boredom is not a state to be cured with entertainment, but a constant companion during long hours of repetitive labor. You might find yourself shelling peas, or spinning wool, or weeding a garden patch for hours on end, with nothing to distract your mind but your own thoughts. This mental void can be terrifying to a modern mind, forcing you to confront your own anxieties without the numbing agent of digital media. But before you can even dwell on the boredom, the physical reality of the medieval world demands your attention again. Your stomach rumbles, not just with hunger, but with a slight cramping sensation, a warning that your digestive system is struggling to process the coarse, heavy food and the bacteria-laden water. This is the silent killer, the invisible threat that lurks in every cup of water and every bite of food. You have no immunity to the local flora of the gut, no resistance to the microbes that live on the unwashed hands of the people around you. Every meal is a game of chance, and the simple act of eating is a risk that you must take to stay alive. You look at your hands, already dirty from the soot of the fire and the mud of the yard, and you realize that there is no antibacterial soap, no hot running water to scrub them clean. You wipe them on your tunic, hoping that is enough, but deep down, you know it is not. The invisible world of germs is gathering against you, preparing an assault that your immune system, coddled by sterilized environments and antibiotics, is ill-equipped to fight. But for now, you must push that fear aside because there is work to be done, and in this world, if you do not work, you do not eat. The community around you is a tight-knit web of mutual dependence, where every person has a role, and a stranger who cannot pull their weight is viewed with suspicion and hostility. You cannot simply buy your way through this day. You must earn your place with sweat and labor. And so, with the smell of wood smoke in your hair and the taste of stale bread in your mouth, you step forward into the mud to begin your first morning. The village is waking up around you, a collection of timber-framed houses with thatched roofs huddled together for protection and warmth. Paths wind between the houses, not planned streets, but tracks worn down by generations of feet and hooves. You hear the clang of a blacksmith's hammer in the distance, the rhythmic thud of an axe chopping wood, the chatter of voices speaking a dialect that is familiar yet strangely difficult to understand. It is English, perhaps, or a version of it, but the vowels are shifted, the cadence is different, and the vocabulary is rich with words for agricultural processes that you have never heard. You are a foreigner in your own history, an alien in a world that looks vaguely like the movie sets you have seen, but smells and feels vastly more intense. There is a rawness to the sensory input, a lack of polish, a gritty reality that no high-definition screen could ever convey. You feel the dampness of the air seeping through your wool tunic, finding the gaps in your clothing, chilling your skin. You feel the weight of the tasks ahead pressing down on you. This is not a simulation. This is the grind of daily life in the Middle Ages, and you have survived only the first hour. As you navigate the path leading away from your dwelling, the ground beneath your feet demands your full attention, for the concept of a paved road is a distant luxury reserved for the Romans of the past or the major cities far from here. The village track is a living, shifting entity, a churned mixture of clay and topsoil that has been pulverized by the passage of carts, cattle, and countless human footsteps into a thick, clinging mire that sucks at your shoes. Your footwear, likely turnshoes made of thin leather sewn inside out and then turned, offers almost no protection against the jagged stones or the piercing cold of the mud, and certainly no arch support or cushioning for the miles you will walk today. Every step requires a micro-adjustment of balance, a constant engagement of your core muscles to prevent a slip that would send you sprawling into the filth, a humiliation that would leave you damp and foul-smelling for the rest of the day. You walk past other houses, observing that they are not uniform but organic variations of the same basic needs, some leaning precariously, others bolstered by fresh timber, all huddled together as if for warmth. Between these structures, the spaces are not manicured lawns or decorative gardens, but working yards filled with the debris of life, piles of firewood, stacks of hurdles for sheep, and perhaps a midden heap where the household waste accumulates until it can be spread on the fields. It is here that you encounter the local wildlife, which is not wild in the forest sense, but domestic and ubiquitous, yet far from the docile creatures you might expect. Chickens scratch and peck at the edges of the path, desperate for grit and insects, while geese, aggressive and territorial, may hiss and charge at your ankles, their serrated beaks capable of delivering a painful pinch. Pigs are the true owners of the street, roaming freely to scavenge for scraps, their strong snouts rooting through the refuse, their bodies bristling with coarse hair, huge and surprisingly fast should they decide you are in their way. You give them a wide berth, for a medieval pig is closer to a wild boar than a modern farm pig, and a collision with one could result in a serious injury that, in the absence of modern medicine, could fester and kill you. The noise of the village is rising now, a cacophony of animal calls, the shouting of drovers moving cattle to the common pasture, and the rhythmic thumping of flails in a nearby barn where grain is being threshed. There is no background hum of machinery to smooth over these sounds, so each one is sharp and percussive, striking your ears with startling clarity. Your destination is likely the village well or a nearby stream, for the water bucket you emptied this morning must be refilled, a task that falls to every household every single day. When you arrive at the water source, you find it is the social hub of the morning, a place where news is exchanged and judgments are passed, but you are too focused on the physical mechanics of the task to socialize. Drawing water from a well is not a matter of turning a tap. It involves lowering a bucket on a fraying rope, waiting for it to sink, and then hauling it up hand over hand, the wet rope biting into your palms, the weight of the water straining your shoulders. A full wooden bucket of water can weigh 20 pounds or more, and you likely need two, which you must carry back to your home using a yoke across your shoulders or simply by the brute strength of your arms. As you walk back, the water sloshes, wetting your legs and chilling you further, and you realize that this single chore, which takes mere seconds in the modern world, has consumed perhaps 30 minutes of your time and a significant portion of your energy. And you will have to do it again later. Upon returning the water to your home, the real work of the day begins, and unless you are a specialized craftsman like a blacksmith or a miller, your work is almost certainly agricultural. You head out to the fields, which are not vast, fenced monocultures, but long, narrow strips of land intermingled with the strips of your neighbors, a patchwork quilt of ownership and responsibility that requires constant negotiation and cooperation. The walk to the fields might be a mile or more, adding to the distance your thin-soled shoes must cover, and once there, the tools you pick up are heavy, crude, and unbalanced. A spade is not a lightweight steel tool with a fiberglass handle, but a wooden board shod with a thin strip of iron, heavy even before you lift a single clod of earth. A scythe or a sickle requires a specific, rhythmic twisting of the torso that your body has never learned, and within minutes, your back screams in protest, your oblique muscles spasming from the unfamiliar motion. There are no ergonomic grips, no shock-absorbing gloves, only the rough wood of the handle rubbing against the soft skin of your modern hands, raising blisters that will burst and bleed before the sun reaches its zenith. You look out across the field and see the sheer scale of the labor required, the acres of land that must be plowed, sown, weeded, or harvested by hand, with only the help of an ox or a horse if you are wealthy enough to own one. If you are plowing, you are not sitting in an air-conditioned tractor cab. You are walking behind the beast, wrestling the heavy wooden plow to keep it in the furrow, shouting commands, your boots caked in heavy clay, your arms vibrating with every rock the plowshare strikes. The ox moves at a slow, plodding pace, and you must match it, step for step, hour after hour, until the horizon begins to blur and your mind goes numb from the repetition. If it is harvest time, the work is even more urgent, for the crop must be brought in before the rains come, and the entire village turns out to help, creating a frenzy of activity that leaves no room for rest. You are bending, cutting, binding, and lifting, a cycle of movement that compresses your spine and strains your hamstrings, the dust and chaff filling the air, clogging your nose and throat until you are coughing up black phlegm. The sun beats down on you, and there is no escape, for the trees in the fields have been cleared to maximize the growing space, leaving you exposed to the full force of the UV radiation. You sweat profusely, soaking your wool tunic, which becomes heavy and itchy, chafing against your neck and underarms, creating raw, red patches of irritated skin. Thirst becomes a constant, nagging presence, but you cannot simply stop and drink whenever you please. You must wait for a break, or drink from a communal skin or jug that has been sitting in the sun, the water warm and tasting of leather. As the morning wears on, you begin to notice the wildlife in the fields, not the larger animals of the village, but the insects that swarm around you, attracted by your sweat and the disturbance of the soil. Flies buzz incessantly around your face, landing on your eyes and mouth, and you lack the energy to keep swatting them away, eventually learning to tolerate their crawling presence. Horseflies with their razor-sharp mouthparts bite through your thin linen sleeves, leaving painful, swelling welts that itch maddeningly, adding another layer of misery to your physical exhaustion. You look at the sun, trying to gauge the time, hoping it is nearing noon, but it seems to hang motionless in the sky, mocking your fatigue. There is no lunch break in the modern sense, no hour off to sit and scroll through your phone. There is only a brief pause to eat a chunk of bread and cheese, perhaps an apple, sitting on the damp ground or a pile of straw. Your hands are too dirty to clean effectively, so you eat the dirt along with the food, introducing yet more microbes into your system, your body's defenses working overtime silently within you. The conversation among the other workers is sparse, focused on the task at hand, on the weather, on the health of the crops, for there is little energy to waste on idle chatter when there is so much work to be done. You might sense a barrier between you and them, a subtle exclusion, for you are the outsider, the one who moves awkwardly, who tires easily, who does not know the rhythm of the work. They have been doing this since they were children, their bodies adapted to the stress, their hands calloused into leather, their muscles roped and wiry. You are soft, fleshy, and vulnerable, and they watch you with a mixture of pity and disdain, wondering if you will last the day. Even if your work is not in the fields, but in the village, the physical toll is comparable. If you were a woman, your day would be consumed by the endless cycle of food preparation, textile production, and child rearing, tasks that are no less physically demanding than plowing. Grinding grain into flour using a quernstone is a backbreaking task that takes hours of repetitive grinding to produce enough flour for a single loaf of bread, a motion that deforms the skeletons of women over time, as evidenced by archaeological remains. Spinning wool with a drop spindle requires a constant, deft manipulation of the fingers, and a standing posture that leads to varicose veins and swollen feet. Doing laundry involves hauling water, heating it over a fire, and then scrubbing heavy, wet fabrics with lye soap that burns your skin, wringing them out by hand until your wrists feel like they will snap. There is no childcare center, So these tasks are performed with a baby strapped to your back or a toddler clinging to your skirts, adding weight and distraction to every movement. The children themselves are not playing with plastic toys in a safe, enclosed room. They are running through the yard, playing with sticks and stones, interacting with the animals, constantly at risk of injury or infection. You would find yourself constantly scanning for danger, your cortisol levels permanently elevated, the stress of vigilance adding to your fatigue. As the sun finally begins to descend past its peak, signaling the transition to the afternoon, you realize you are only halfway through the daylight hours. Your body is trembling with exhaustion, your caloric intake has been insufficient to match your output, and dehydration is setting in, making your head throb and your vision swim. But you cannot stop. To stop is to fail, and to fail is to starve. The relentless pressure of survival drives you forward, forcing you to find reserves of strength you did not know you possessed, pushing past the pain barrier again and again. This is the reality of the medieval workday. It is not a career, it is not a choice. It is a biological imperative enacted through grueling physical effort. And as you wipe the sweat from your eyes, leaving a streak of mud across your forehead, you look up to see storm clouds gathering on the horizon, a dark bruise against the blue sky. The weather is turning, and with it, the difficulty of your day is about to increase exponentially. For rain in this world brings not just wetness, but a drop in temperature and a transformation of the landscape into a hostile, slippery trap. You brace yourself, gripping the handle of your tool tighter, and bend your back once more to the earth. The rain begins not as a dramatic downpour, but as a steady, chilling drizzle that seems to materialize out of the air itself, instantly changing the texture of your reality. In the modern world, rain is an inconvenience to be deflected by umbrellas and waterproof synthetic fabrics, but here, it is a physical burden that adds weight and misery to every movement. Your wool clothing, which had been your primary defense against the cold, now begins to absorb the moisture like a sponge, becoming heavy and sagging against your skin. As the fibers swell with water, the smell of the wet wool intensifies, a pungent, animalistic odor that rises up to mix with the smell of the wet earth and your own unwashed body. The water seeps through the layers slowly but inevitably, finding its way to your linen undergarments, turning them into cold, clammy sheets that cling to your chest and back, sapping your body heat at an alarming rate. You realize with a sense of dread that you have no way to dry these clothes quickly. There is no tumble dryer waiting at home, no radiator to drape them over, only the smoky, crowded fire where you will have to compete for warmth with the rest of your household. Until then, you must simply exist in this state of wetness, your skin puckering and chafing as the damp fabric rubs against it with every swing of the scythe or lift of the shovel. The ground beneath your feet transforms from a difficult surface into a treacherous one, the clay soil turning into a slick, glue-like substance that coats your shoes in heavy clumps, adding pounds of weight to each foot. You find yourself slipping and sliding, expending precious energy just to stay upright, your ankles straining against the unpredictable terrain, and you know that a fall now would mean being coated in cold mud that will not dry for days. Amidst this physical discomfort, your body makes another urgent demand, a biological necessity that cannot be ignored, and you are forced to confront the reality of medieval sanitation. There is no tiled bathroom with a locking door, no porcelain flush toilet, no roll of soft paper, and certainly no privacy as you understand it. If you are in the fields, you might simply seek the shelter of a hedgerow or a ditch, exposing yourself to the elements and the eyes of your fellow workers, who view this act with a pragmatic indifference that you find deeply unsettling. If you are in the village, you must make your way to a communal latrine or a cesspit, often located in the backyard of a dwelling, a simple pit dug into the earth, perhaps covered by a wooden board with a hole cut into it, or merely a wooden beam suspended over the filth. The smell as you approach is indescribable, a concentrated assault of ammonia and decay that makes your eyes water and your stomach turn, for these pits are emptied rarely and often sit open to the air. You must balance carefully, for the wood is slippery with rain and filth, and the fear of falling in is not irrational paranoia but a genuine danger, a horrific accident that happens more often than history books care to mention. When the act is done, you reach for something to clean yourself and find only what is available: a handful of moss, a few broad leaves, a scraper made of wood or pottery, or perhaps simply a smooth stone. The abrasion is harsh, leaving your skin raw and irritated, a constant source of discomfort that will plague you every time you walk or sit for the rest of the day. There is no sink to wash your hands afterwards, no soap dispenser to pump, so you might rinse your fingers in a puddle or wipe them on the grass, but the bacteria remain, invisible and deadly, waiting for the moment they can enter your system. It is then, as you return to your work with filthy hands, that the smallest of accidents occurs, an event that would be trivial in your previous life, but carries the weight of a potential death sentence here. Perhaps your hand slips on the wet handle of your tool, or you graze your knuckle against a rough stone, or a thorn pierces your skin as you clear brush. You look down to see a bead of bright red blood welling up against the grime of your skin, a tiny breach in your body's defenses. In the 21st century, you would wash this cut, apply an antibiotic ointment, and cover it with a sterile adhesive bandage, forgetting about it within an hour. Here, you have none of those things. You might instinctively suck on the wound, trying to clean it with saliva, or wrap it in a strip of rag torn from your dirty hem, but the damage is done. The bacteria from the soil, from the manure in the fields, and from the latrine you just visited have found an entry point. You do not know it yet, but this small scratch could easily become infected, swelling with pus and turning angry red, leading to blood poisoning or gangrene in a world where antibiotics are centuries away from discovery. The fear of tetanus is a silent specter, for the soil is rich with the bacteria that cause it, and a simple puncture wound can lead to a death of agonizing muscle spasms and locked jaws. But you cannot stop working to nurse a scratch. The social pressure of the village is a physical weight, heavier than the rain. You are watched not only by your neighbors but potentially by the reeve, the official elected to oversee the work of the peasants, ensuring that everyone contributes their quota of labor to the Lord's domain. To stop to complain or to show weakness is to invite scorn or even a fine in the manor court, so you grit your teeth and grip the tool again, ignoring the stinging pain in your hand. The afternoon stretches out into an eternity of gray light and repetitive motion, the passage of time marked only by the slow, aching fatigue accumulating in your muscles. Hunger returns, a hollow, gnawing sensation, but the next meal is hours away, waiting for the end of the workday when the sun finally dips below the horizon. You might try to distract yourself by looking around at the landscape, but the view offers no comfort, only the stark reality of a world without infrastructure. There are no power lines cutting across the sky, no distant hum of a highway, no airplanes leaving contrails in the clouds. The world feels vast and empty, yet simultaneously claustrophobic because you are tethered to this small patch of earth. Your thirst becomes a dominant thought, overriding the cold and the pain, and you look longingly at the stream that runs near the field. You have heard the myths that medieval people drank only ale and wine because the water was unsafe, but this is a half-truth. While weak ale is a staple for the caloric energy and some safety, water is still the primary beverage for the poor during labor. However, looking at the stream, you see the brown, churning water, swollen with the runoff from the rain, carrying the waste from the upstream settlements and the manure from the fields. You know that drinking it is a gamble, a roll of the dice against dysentery, cholera, or parasites that could take up residence in your intestines, consuming the nutrients you so desperately need. If you have a leather flask of weak ale or cider, you take a sip, the sour, flat taste offering little pleasure but providing a momentary relief from the dryness in your throat. The alcohol content is low, not enough to intoxicate, but enough to dull the edges of your perception slightly, a mild sedative against the harshness of your reality. As the light begins to fail, the temperature drops further, the dampness seeping into your bones, making your joints ache with a premonition of the arthritis that plagues almost everyone in this era by the time they are 30. You notice the people around you are slowing down, their movements becoming heavier, their faces set in grim masks of endurance. They are not unhappy in the modern sense of depression, but they possess a stoicism forged by necessity, an acceptance of hardship that you find alien and terrifying. They do not expect life to be easy. They do not expect to be comfortable. They expect only to survive, and today, that survival requires finishing the furrow, harvesting the last of the grain, or gathering the wood before the true dark sets in. The shadow of the forest at the edge of the fields begins to lengthen, and with it comes a primal fear that modern electric lights have banished from your mind, the fear of what lies in the dark. The woods are not a recreational park for hiking. They are the domain of wolves, boars, and outlaws, a place of danger where the king's law is weak and nature's law is absolute. You feel an instinctive urge to retreat to the safety of the village, to the fire and the walls, but you must wait for the signal, for the collective decision that the work is done. Finally, a shout goes up, or a bell rings in the distance from the church tower, the sound thin and wavering in the wind. Tools are lowered, backs are straightened with audible groans, and the slow procession back to the village begins. You join the line of weary bodies, your feet dragging in the mud, your clothes heavy with water, your hand throbbing, your stomach empty. You are returning to a home that is dark, cold until the fire is stoked, and crowded, but at this moment it feels like a sanctuary. However, the day is not over. The transition from work to rest is not immediate, for there are animals to be tended, equipment to be cleaned, and the evening meal to be prepared in the semi-darkness. As you walk, you realize that you have not spoken a meaningful sentence to anyone all day, your communication limited to grunts of effort and brief commands. The isolation of your mind within the crowd is profound. You are surrounded by people, yet you are utterly alone in your experience of this hardship, separated by a gulf of centuries in expectation and comfort. You look at your hands again, grimy and bleeding, and you wonder how you will ever get them clean enough to eat with. And then you realize with a sinking heart that you won't. You will eat with these hands, you will sleep in this dirt, and you will wake up tomorrow to do it all again. The walk back seems longer than the walk out, every step a battle against gravity, and as the first true stars appear in the gaps between the clouds, you feel a level of exhaustion that is not just physical, but existential. You are surviving, yes, but the cost of that survival is stripping away everything you thought was essential to your humanity, your cleanliness, your comfort, your sense of self, leaving only a raw, shivering creature trudging through the mud. Crossing the threshold back into your dwelling offers a reprieve from the wind and the rain, but it does not offer comfort in the way you understand the word. The interior of the house is now pitch black, save for the dull red glow of the embers in the central hearth, which must be coaxed back into a flame to cook the evening meal and dry your sodden clothes. You step onto the dirt floor, your eyes straining to adjust, and the first thing you notice is that the space has shrunk, for the animals that were outside during the day have now been brought in for the night. In the corner, separated perhaps by a low wattle fence or simply tethered to a post, stands the family cow or a few sheep, their large bodies radiating heat, but also filling the small room with the pungent, unmistakable scent of wet fur and ammonia. They shift and stamp, their hooves thumping against the packed earth, their chewing and breathing becoming the background soundtrack to your evening. You are sharing your living room, your kitchen, and your bedroom with livestock, a proximity that facilitates the transfer of lice, fleas, and diseases directly from beast to human. The air is thick, not just with animal smells, but with the smoke that begins to billow once more as fresh wood and turf are thrown onto the fire. Without a chimney to draw it upward, the smoke hangs in a dense, blue-gray layer at head height, stinging your eyes until they water uncontrollably and making every breath a shallow, rasping effort. You might try to sit on a low stool or crouch near the ground to escape the worst of it, but there is no escaping the particulate matter that is slowly coating your lungs with soot, a lifetime of which will leave them black and scarred like those of a heavy smoker. There is no time to collapse and rest yet, for the evening meal must be prepared, a task that requires navigating the dark, cluttered room to find ingredients and utensils. Lighting is a luxury you can barely afford. Beeswax candles are for the church and the wealthy, so if you have light, it comes from a rushlight, a dried reed dipped in animal fat. It burns with a sputter, giving off a dim, flickering light that casts long, distorting shadows against the walls and emits a smell of rancid grease that permeates the food and the air. Under this weak illumination, you sit down to the main meal of the day, which is likely the same meal you will eat tomorrow, and the day after that, and for the rest of the season. The pot that hangs over the fire contains pottage, a perpetual stew that is rarely emptied, simply topped up with whatever ingredients are available: peas, beans, onions, cabbage, and perhaps a scrap of salted pork or bacon fat for flavor. The vegetables have been boiled until they are a uniform gray mush, devoid of texture, stripped of many water-soluble vitamins, but safe from the bacteria that would thrive in raw food. You are handed a wooden bowl and a spoon, or perhaps a hunk of stale bread to use as a scoop, known as a trencher. As you eat, you notice the lack of seasoning. Salt is valuable and used sparingly, pepper is a spice for kings, and sugar is virtually unknown to a person of your station. The flavor is earthy, bland, and repetitive, a monotonous intake of calories designed to keep you alive rather than to provide pleasure. You chew carefully, mindful of the bread, for the flour was ground between stones that slowly disintegrate, leaving fine grit in the dough that acts like sandpaper on your teeth. If you bite down too hard, you risk cracking a tooth, a catastrophe in a world where dentistry consists of extraction by a barber surgeon with a pair of pliers and no anesthetic. As you swallow the hot, heavy stew, you might feel a dull throbbing in your hand, the place where you cut yourself earlier in the fields. In the dim light, you peel back the dirty rag to inspect the wound and see that the edges are red and angry, the skin hot to the touch. There is no antiseptic cream to apply, no sterile gauze to wrap it in, and the only medical advice available comes from folk wisdom that teeters on the edge of superstition. You might be advised to apply a poultice of herbs mixed with honey, which has some antibacterial properties, or perhaps something more dangerous, like dung or cobwebs, believed to staunch the flow of blood but actually introducing more pathogens. Pain relief is non-existent. If the throbbing keeps you awake, your only recourse is to drink more of the weak ale or perhaps a decoction of willow bark if you know how to prepare it, which offers only a mild reduction in inflammation. You realize that a simple infection, something that would require a course of antibiotics in the 21st century, is a roll of the dice with your life, and the anxiety of this knowledge sits heavier in your stomach than the pottage. Conversation around the fire is muted, driven by exhaustion rather than sociability. There is no television to watch, no radio to listen to, no news from the outside world to discuss. The The topics are circular and local: the weather, the crops, the gossip of the village, the fear of the coming winter. If there is storytelling, it is not the high fantasy of novels, but cautionary tales, religious parables, or local legends that reinforce the strict social and moral order of your world. The worldview of the people around you is shaped by an absolute, terrifying certainty in the supernatural. Devils, demons, and spirits are not metaphors, but physical realities that lurk in the dark corners of the room and the woods outside. This fear of the unseen adds a psychological weight to the darkness, making the night feel hostile and predatory. You might glance at the door, barred heavily against the night, not just to keep out wolves or thieves, but to keep out the chaotic forces that rule the world when the sun is gone. As the meal concludes, there is no washing up in the modern sense. The bowls are wiped clean with bread or a finger, or perhaps rinsed with a splash of water and set aside for the morning. There is no leisure time, no hour to read a book or pursue a hobby, for candles are too expensive to burn for fun, and your body is too broken to do anything but seek rest. The transition to sleep is abrupt. As the fire dies down, the temperature in the room plummets, and the only way to stay warm is to huddle together. Privacy is a concept that simply does not apply here. The entire family, and perhaps guests or servants, sleep in the same room, often in the same large bed or on pallets arranged close to the hearth. You begin the process of undressing, but you do not strip down to bare skin, for the night air is freezing and the blankets are not enough. You remove your outer wool tunic, which is heavy with damp and mud, and hang it on a peg or lay it over a bench, hoping it will be somewhat dry by dawn. You sleep in your linen undergarments, the same ones you have worn all day, the same ones that are soaked with sweat and begrimed with the dust of the fields. There is no evening shower, no toothbrushing ritual, no face washing. You carry the dirt of the day into the bed with you. As you crawl onto the mattress, the straw rustles and compresses beneath you, and you are immediately reminded of the other inhabitants of the bed. The fleas, energized by the warmth of your body, begin their nightly feast, and you feel the sharp, pricking bites on your legs and torso. You scratch instinctively, your fingernails digging into your unwashed skin, creating new avenues for infection, but the itching is maddening and relentless. Bedbugs, too, may emerge from the crevices of the wood, attracted by the carbon dioxide of your breath, adding their bites to the constellation of welts on your skin. You lie there in the dark, pressed against the bodies of others, listening to the sounds of the house settling, the groan of the timbers, the shifting of the cow in the corner, the snoring of a relative, the scuttling of a rat in the thatch above. The smell is intense, a mixture of wood smoke, stale sweat, animal dung, and unwashed bodies, but your nose has grown somewhat accustomed to it, filtering it out into a background hum of odor. Your mind, however, struggles to settle. Without the artificial regulation of electric light, your sleep patterns are different. You might fall asleep quickly from sheer exhaustion, but you may wake in the middle of the night for an hour or two, a period known as the watch. During this time, you lie awake in the absolute darkness, your thoughts drifting to the uncertainties of your existence. Will the harvest be enough? Will the infection in your hand spread? Will the Lord demand more taxes? The silence of the pre-industrial world is heavy, devoid of the hum of fridges or the distant rush of traffic, leaving you alone with the beating of your own heart and the wind howling through the eaves. You realize that you are completely vulnerable, a soft, fleshy organism in a hard, indifferent world, protected only by a thin wall of wattle and daub and the fragile structure of society. There are no police to call, no hospitals to rush to, no insurance policies to fall back on. You are walking a tightrope over a chasm of disaster every single day. As sleep finally overtakes you again, it is not the deep, restorative sleep of a comfortable mattress and a climate-controlled room, but a shallow, fitful rest, interrupted by cold, by itching, and by the hard knots of the straw beneath your hips. You drift off knowing that in a few short hours, before the sun has even risen, the rooster will crow, the cycle will reset, and you will be forced to drag your aching body from the warmth to face the mud and the labor once more. This was a normal day. It was not a day of battle, or plague, or execution. It was a Tuesday. And if you were truly living in this time, you would have to do it thousands of times over, with no hope of retirement, no weekend breaks, and no vacation, until your body simply gave out. But let us consider for a moment that your day did not end simply with sleep. Let us consider the fragility of the night itself, and the dangers that arise when the protective veil of daily routine is lifted. Perhaps in the middle of the night, you are woken not by fleas, but by a sound that strikes fear into the heart of every medieval villager, the crackle of fire that is not in the hearth. Fire is the great destroyer of the medieval world, a constant shadow that hangs over every timber-framed village. With houses built of wood, straw, and dry wattle, and with open fires burning in the center of every room, a single spark, a kicked ember, or a fallen rushlight can turn a home into an inferno in minutes. You wake to the smell of burning thatch, a sharp, acrid odor distinct from the comforting smell of the hearth, and the room is suddenly illuminated by a terrifying, dancing orange light. Panic is immediate and absolute. There is no fire department to summon. The safety of the village depends entirely on the bucket chain, on the frantic efforts of neighbors passing water from the well, hand over hand, to douse the flames. You scramble from the bed, adrenaline flooding your exhausted system, grabbing whatever is at hand, a child, a tool, a blanket, and rushing out into the cold night air. The chaos is deafening, people screaming, animals bellowing in terror as they are dragged from the burning structure, the roar of the flames consuming the dry straw of the roof. You stand in the mud, shivering in your linen undergarments, watching as the structure that held your food, your tools, and your shelter is reduced to ash. In the modern world, a house fire is a tragedy, but it is covered by insurance, by emergency services, by temporary housing. Here, it is a total erasure of your livelihood. If the fire spreads, as it often does, leaping from thatch to thatch in the crowded village, the entire community can be wiped out in an hour, leaving everyone destitute, exposed to the elements without food or cover. But even if the fire is contained, even if it is just a nightmare that does not come to pass tonight, the fear of it remains, a subconscious tension that never truly leaves you. You lie back down, your heart hammering against your ribs, the adrenaline slowly fatting into a shaking fatigue, and you stare up at the invisible ceiling, praying to a God you hope is listening. The darkness presses in again, heavy and indifferent. You close your eyes, trying to ignore the pain in your hand, the itch on your legs, the cold in your toes, and you drift into a dream of a world where rooms are warm without fire, where water flows from a wall, and where light can be summoned with the touch of a finger. A world that to you is a memory, but to the medieval mind would be a paradise beyond comprehension. You sleep, but the night is short, and the dawn is relentless. The first gray light will come too soon, bringing with it the hunger, the work, and the mud. This is the reality you have stepped into. This is the life you would lead. And the question remains, hanging in the smoky air, how long could you truly last? As the days turn into weeks, and the weeks into months, the novelty of the environment fades, leaving only the grinding reality of the physical toll on your body. In the modern world, we view health as the default state, and illness as an interruption to be quickly corrected by a pill or a procedure. In the medieval world, however, health is a fleeting anomaly, and the default state of human existence is a low-level, chronic discomfort punctuated by episodes of acute agony. You would begin to notice this deterioration first in your mouth. For dental hygiene, as you know, it has ceased to exist the moment you arrived. There are no toothbrushes, no fluoride toothpaste, and no floss to remove the food particles stuck between your teeth after a meal of coarse bread and stringy meat. While it is true that the lack of refined sugar in your diet protects you from the rapid, cavity-ridden decay of modern sugar consumers, you face a different mechanical threat: the grit in the bread. The millstones that grind the grain are slowly disintegrating into the flour, meaning that every bite you take acts as a file, slowly sanding down the enamel of your teeth, flattening the crowns and exposing the sensitive dentin underneath. You might run your tongue over your teeth and feel them becoming jagged and short, the nerves moving closer to the surface with every meal. Eventually, a tooth will crack, or decay will set in deep within the root, leading to an abscess, a pocket of infection that swells and throbs with a pressure that makes sleep impossible. In your time, this would be a simple trip to the dentist for a root canal and a crown, a procedure performed under local anesthesia with sterile instruments. Here, a toothache is a harbinger of excruciating pain and potential death, for the infection can easily spread to the jawbone or the brain. The only cure is extraction, and the person who performs it is not a specialized dentist, but likely the local barber surgeon or simply a blacksmith with a pair of strong pliers. There is no numbing agent, no shot of Novocaine to dull the sensation. There is only a swig of strong spirits if you can afford it, and the grip of strong hands holding your head steady. You would sit on a low stool, perhaps in the public market or the smithy, surrounded by the sights and smells of the village, opening your mouth to a stranger whose hands are stained with the blood of previous patients. The instrument is cold iron, unsterilized, introduced directly into the open wound in your mouth. The pain of the extraction itself is blinding, a trauma that shocks your entire nervous system, but the aftermath is equally dangerous, leaving a gaping hole in your gum that is prone to further infection from the food you eat and the air you breathe. You would look around at the smiles of the people in the village and see the gaps, the blackened stumps, the swollen jaws, and realize that a full set of teeth is a rarity, a sign of youth that fades quickly. But the threats to your body are not just external. They are living inside you, thriving in the dark, warm environment of your intestines. Because of the water you drink, the unwashed vegetables you eat, and the proximity to animal waste, it is almost a certainty that you are hosting a colony of parasites. Roundworms, tapeworms, and whipworms are not exceptional medical cases here. They are the silent companions of the average peasant, consuming a portion of the little food you eat, leaving you constantly hungry and malnourished regardless of your intake. You might feel them moving, a subtle, horrifying sensation in your gut, or see the evidence of their existence in the latrine, a psychological blow that reinforces the lack of separation between you and the filth of the world. These parasites weaken your immune system, leaving you lethargic and anemic, your skin turning a pale, waxy color, your energy reserves constantly depleted. This chronic weakness makes you susceptible to the fevers that sweep through the village with the changing seasons, illnesses that modern medicine would identify as influenza, typhoid, or dysentery, but which here are simply mysterious, often fatal afflictions. When you do fall ill, the medical care you receive is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of human biology that has persisted for over 1,000 years. The germ theory of disease does not exist. Instead, your body is believed to be governed by the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Illness is seen as an imbalance of these fluids, and the treatments are designed to restore equilibrium, often through methods that are actively harmful to a weakened body. If you have a fever, the logic of the time dictates that you have too much blood, or that the blood is hot and needs to be released to cool you down. And so, the barber surgeon is called not to stitch you up, but to cut you open. Bloodletting is the universal remedy, performed with a lancet or by applying leeches to your skin, draining pints of precious blood from a body that is already fighting infection and dehydration. You would sit there, watching your own life force drip into a bowl, feeling the dizziness wash over you, believing, because everyone around you believes, that this is helping. If you are not bled, you might be purged, given powerful emetics or laxatives made from toxic herbs to force the bad humors out of your body, causing violent vomiting and diarrhea that further dehydrates you and strips your body of electrolytes. The cure is often a greater ordeal than the disease, a test of endurance that weeds out the frail and leaves only the strongest survivors. Even if you avoid acute illness, the environment attacks your skin, the barrier between you and the world. Without regular bathing in hot water and soap, your pores become clogged with dirt and grease, leading to painful boils and carbuncles that can swell to the size of golf balls. Fungal infections ring your skin with red, itching patches, thriving in the damp wool of your clothing. Scabies, a microscopic mite that burrows into the upper layer of the skin to lay its eggs, causes an itch so intense that you tear your own flesh in your sleep, creating open sores that refuse to heal. You would find yourself constantly scratching, a nervous tic shared by everyone around you, a physical manifestation of the biological siege you are under. And then there is the specter of injury, which looms over every physical task you perform. In a world driven by manual labor, a broken bone is a catastrophe that can end your ability to work, and thus your ability to eat. If you break your leg, there are no X-rays to guide the setting of the bone, no pins or plates to hold it together while it heals. The bone is set by feel, often resulting in a limb that heals crooked or shorter than the other, leaving you with a permanent limp and a lifetime of chronic pain. If the break is compound, meaning the bone pierces the skin, the prognosis is grim. In an era without antibiotics, the exposed bone acts as a wick for bacteria, leading almost inevitably to gangrene, a necrosis of the tissue that turns the flesh black and smells of rotting meat. The only way to save your life then is amputation, a procedure of unimaginable brutality performed with a saw and a cauterizing iron, with speed being the only mercy the surgeon can offer. Most would not survive the shock or the blood loss, and those who do are relegated to a life of beggary, for there is no disability insurance, no social safety net for those who cannot plow or harvest. You would see these figures on the edges of the village or at the church doors, living warnings of the fragility of the human frame. Women face an additional, omnipresent danger that men do not, the peril of childbirth. In the medieval period, giving birth is the single most dangerous event in a woman's life, a coin toss with death that occurs over and over again. There are no sterile delivery rooms, no fetal monitors, no C-sections to rescue a difficult labor. If the baby is breech, or if the mother's pelvis is too narrow, the outcome is often fatal for both, a tragedy so common that it is woven into the fabric of daily grief. You would notice that many men in the village have had 2 or 3 wives, not because of divorce, but because they have buried their partners in the churchyard, victims of the bed of blood. This proximity to death changes the way you view life. It makes you fatalistic, accepting of loss in a way that the modern mind, accustomed to control and safety, finds deeply disturbing. You would see parents who do not name their children until they have survived the first perilous year, protecting their hearts from the attachment to a life that is statistically likely to be extinguished. As you walk through the village, you look at the faces of the people and realize that almost no one looks healthy by your standards. They are aged prematurely, their skin leathery and wrinkled from sun exposure, their bodies bent by labor, their eyes often clouded by cataracts or infections. A person of 40 is considered an elder, not because they are ancient, but because they have survived 4 decades of a gauntlet that kills so many others. You, with your soft hands, your straight teeth, and your vaccinated immune system, are an anomaly, a biological impossibility in this landscape. But your modern advantages are fading. Your vaccines are wearing off or are irrelevant to the specific strains of bacteria here. Your soft hands are blistering and infecting. Your straight teeth are grinding down. You are slowly reverting to the mean, your body adapting, or failing to adapt to a world that cares nothing for your comfort. And as the sun sets on another day, and you nurse your aching jaw or your itching skin, you realize that the greatest luxury of the future you left behind was not the iPhone or the internet. It was the silent, invisible shield of modern medicine that stood between you and the chaotic biology of the natural world. Here the shield is gone. You are biological matter in a food chain that includes wolves, worms, and bacteria, and you are fighting a war on a cellular level that you are ill-equipped to win. The night brings a drop in temperature that makes your joints ache, a reminder of the dampness that never truly leaves the walls of your home or the marrow of your bones. You lie down, pulling the rough wool blanket up to your chin, trying to find a position that eases the pressure on your sores. The air in the room is heavy with the breathing of the others, a collective respiratory effort to survive the night. You close your eyes, but the darkness offers no escape from the physical sensations of your own body, which has become a cage of discomfort. Tomorrow, the rooster will crow again. Tomorrow, the labor will resume. And you will have to do it all with a body that is one day older, one day weaker, and one day closer to the edge of what it can endure. The romance of the past has been stripped away completely, leaving only the raw biology of survival. Beyond the physical torment of your body and the relentless demands of the environment, there exists another layer of your reality that is perhaps even more suffocating to a modern mind: the absolute lack of freedom. In the world you come from, you are accustomed to the concept of autonomy, the idea that you are the master of your own destiny, free to travel where you wish, work where you choose, and live as you please within the bounds of the law. Here, that concept is not just foreign, it is heretical. You are likely a villain or a serf, which means you are unfree, bound by blood and law to the land on which you were born. You do not own the earth beneath your feet. It is owned by a lord, a distant figure of immense power who views you not as a citizen, but as an economic asset, a piece of machinery that produces grain and wealth. You cannot simply decide that the farming life is too hard and move to the next town to seek a trade. To leave the manor without permission is a crime, marking you as a fugitive. If you are caught, you will be branded on the forehead with a hot iron, a permanent mark of your disobedience that will ostracize you from society forever. Or you will be dragged back in chains to face a punishment that will serve as a terrifying example to your neighbors. Your entire world is circumscribed by the boundaries of the parish, a radius of perhaps 3 or 4 miles, and it is entirely possible that you will live and die without ever seeing what lies beyond the horizon. This sense of confinement creates a psychological claustrophobia, a feeling that the walls of your existence are immovable, and that your life is a script written by someone else before you were even born. The labor you perform in the fields is not merely for your own survival. A significant portion of your time, perhaps 3 days a week, is owed to the Lord as week work. This means that during the most critical times of the year, when your own crops are withering and need attention, or when the harvest is ready to be brought in, you are forced to ignore your own livelihood to work on the Lord's domain. You must watch your own grain rot in the rain while you harvest the Lord's grain, a bitter irony that burns in your chest as you swing the scythe. knowing that his barns will be full while yours may stand empty. And the taking does not stop with your labor. Every aspect of your life is monetized and taxed by the manorial system, a complex web of fees designed to extract every possible resource from you. If you wish to grind your grain into flour, you cannot use a hand mill at home. That is illegal. You are forced by law to take your grain to the Lord's mill, where the miller, a man widely hated and suspected of theft, will take a cut of your flour as a toll, often dipping his measure deep and taking more than his fair share. If you wish to bake your bread, you may be required to use the communal oven, again paying a fee for the privilege of cooking the food you grew. If you gather wood from the forest to heat your home, you must pay pannage or wood penny. If you brew ale, you must pay a fine if it is not up to standard, or a tax for the right to sell it. Even the most personal milestones of your life are transactions. If your daughter wishes to marry, you must pay a merchant, a fine to the Lord for the loss of her labor on the estate, a humiliation that reduces your child to a unit of production. And in death, the system delivers its final insult. When the head of your household dies, the Lord is entitled to the Harriet, which is usually the family's best beast, the best cow, the best ox, or the best horse. At the very moment when the family is most vulnerable, having lost its primary earner, the system swoops in to take the most valuable asset they possess, pushing the survivors instantly into destitution. You live in a state of constant debt and obligation, running on a treadmill of production where the surplus is always skimmed off the top, leaving you with just enough to survive, and sometimes not even that. Justice in this world is not an impartial system of checks and balances, but a tool of control wielded by those who own the land. You are subject to the manor court, which meets regularly to enforce the customs of the estate and to levy fines for an endless list of infractions. Did you let your cow stray into the Lord's meadow? Fined. Did you fail to repair the ditch by the road? Fined. Did you brew ale before the official taster arrived? Fined. There are no defense attorneys, no appeals courts, no concept of innocent until proven guilty. The court is composed of your neighbors, presided over by the Lord's steward, and it functions on a system of collective pressure and public shamming. You are part of a tithing, a group of 10 or 12 men who are legally responsible for each other's behavior. If one man in your tithing commits a crime and runs away, the rest of you must pay his fine. This creates a surveillance state more effective than any camera network, for your neighbors are constantly watching you, judging you, and policing you, knowing that your mistakes will come out of their pockets. Privacy is non-existent. Your business is everyone's business, and the social pressure to conform is a crushing weight that dictates your every move. If you break the social contract, the punishments are physical, public, and humiliating. You might be placed in the stocks or the pillory, locked into a wooden frame in the center of the village, exposed to the elements and the ridicule of your peers, who might throw mud, rotten vegetables, or stones at you. For more serious crimes like theft, the penalties escalate quickly to mutilation, the loss of an ear, a hand, or an eye, or to hanging, a slow and agonizing death on the gibbet that stands at the crossroads as a grim warning. You walk past these rotting corpses on your way to market, the birds picking at their bones, and you are reminded that the line between a normal day and a violent end is terrifyingly thin. But there is another authority that looms even larger than the Lord, one that claims dominion not just over your body, but over your eternal soul, the church. The medieval church is not merely a place of worship. It is the calendar, the clock, the news source, and the ultimate arbiter of truth. You live in a world where the supernatural is real, where the devil is actively plotting your downfall, and where hell is a literal pit of fire awaiting those who stray. This fear is cultivated and reinforced every Sunday, as you stand in the cold, unheated nave of the stone church, listening to the Mass in Latin, a language you do not understand but whose rhythms are woven into your subconscious. You look at the paintings on the walls, the doom paintings that depict the Last Judgment in graphic detail, showing naked souls being dragged into the mouth of a beast by demons with pitchforks. This imagery is the background radiation of your mind, a constant reminder that your suffering on earth is a test, and that obedience is the price of salvation. The church, too, demands its share of your labor and your harvest. You must pay the tithe, giving 10% of everything you produce, your grain, your wool, your eggs, your milk, to the parish priest. This is not a voluntary donation. It is a tax enforced by the threat of excommunication, which would cut you off from the sacraments, from the community, and from God Himself. You watch the tithe barn filling up, a massive stone structure that rivals the Lord's Hall, while your own children look at empty bowls and you must swallow the resentment. For to speak against the church is to invite the charge of heresy. As the year progresses, you become acutely aware of the fragility of the food supply, a terror known as the hungry gap. This is the period in late spring, before the new harvest is ready, but after the stores from the previous year have run out. The winter was long, and the grain you carefully stored has been depleted by daily consumption, by the tithe, by the Lord's dues, and by the rats that you cannot keep out of your granary. You open the bin and see the bottom, the dust of the last few bushels, and a cold panic grips your heart. The days are getting longer. The work in the fields is getting harder as the planting season begins, requiring more calories, but you have less food to eat than ever. You begin to ration, cutting the daily loaf into smaller and smaller pieces, skipping meals so your children can eat, boiling nettles and docks gathered from the hedgerows to fill your stomach with something, anything. You look at your neighbors and see the same gauntness in their faces, the hollow eyes, the loosening of belts. The village becomes quieter, the energy for conversation or dispute evaporating as bodies switch into survival mode, conserving every ounce of glucose for the essential functions of life. This is not a famine caused by war or disaster. This is the structural, cyclical starvation that is built into the agricultural year. You are living on the edge of biological viability, your body consuming its own fat reserves, then its muscle tissue, leaving you weak and dizzy as you push the plow through the heavy earth. You might dream of meat, of roasting pork or a leg of mutton, but meat is a luxury for the rich, or a rare treat for a feast day. If you are desperate, you might consider poaching, setting a snare for a rabbit in the Lord's woods, but the penalty for poaching is severe, often blinding or death, and the foresters are constantly patrolling, looking for signs of illegal traps. So you starve slowly, legally, obediently, waiting for the green shoots of the new crop to rise high enough to offer hope. It is during this time of weakness that the social fabric strains. Theft increases as desperation overrides fear, and neighbor turns against neighbor for a sack of barley or a stolen chicken. The good old days of community spirit dissolve when bellies are empty, replaced by a primal, sharp-elbowed competition for resources. You realize that the romantic image of the merry peasant is a lie. The reality is a grim, suspicious struggle where charity is a luxury few can afford. And yet amidst this deprivation, life must go on. You must still attend the manor court. You must still pay your dues. You must still bow to the Lord as He rides past on a horse that eats better oats than your children. The psychological burden of this inequality is heavy. You are constantly reminded of your inferiority, trained from birth to lower your eyes, to doff your cap, to accept your station as divinely ordained. To question this order is to question God, to risk the stability of the entire world. And so you internalize the oppression, carrying it as a weight in your soul that matches the ache in your back. As the sun sets on this phase of your existence, you understand that survival is not just about staying alive. It is about enduring a state of permanent subjugation. You are a cog in a machine that does not care if you break, as long as you turn for a while. The walls of your world are high, and there is no door. You are trapped in time, trapped in place, and trapped in class. And as the darkness gathers, you wonder if the physical pain of the labor is actually a mercy, a distraction that keeps you from thinking too deeply about the cage you are in. As the darkness of the evening settles in fully, sealing the village into a pocket of isolation, you are forced to confront the psychological landscape of the medieval mind, a terrain as treacherous as the muddy fields you labored in all day. You are a child of the age of reason, a product of science and logic, where cause and effect are understood through biology, physics, and meteorology. But here, in this dimly lit room, those certainties evaporate, replaced by a terrifying and absolute belief in the supernatural. The night is not merely the absence of light. It is the domain of active, malevolent forces that are constantly seeking to do you harm. You do not simply fear the dark because you might trip and fall. You fear it because it is inhabited. To the medieval mind, the air is thick with invisible entities, demons, spirits, fairies, and goblins, not the whimsical creatures of Victorian storybooks, but dangerous, capricious beings that steal children, spoil milk, and bring sickness. If your cow takes ill suddenly, you do not wonder what poisonous weed it ate. You wonder who looked at it with the evil eye, who among your neighbors holds a grudge strong enough to manifest as a curse. This breeds a culture of intense paranoia, where every misfortune must have a culprit, and where the blame often falls on the marginalized or the eccentric. You find yourself constantly performing small, ritualistic protections, making the sign of the cross when you pass a certain tree, hanging a horseshoe above the door, carrying a talisman in your pocket, not because you truly believe in them, but because the fear around you is contagious. If a storm rolls in, thunder shaking the thatch of your roof, you do not think of low-pressure systems or electrical discharges. You hear the anger of God or the wheels of the devil's chariot, and you cower in genuine spiritual terror. This constant state of magical thinking is exhausting, forcing your brain to remain in a state of high alert, interpreting every creak of the house and every hoot of an owl as a potential omen. You are living in a world without neutral events. Everything is a sign, everything has a meaning, and usually that meaning is a warning. As you sit by the dying fire, staring into the embers, you might try to rationalize your situation, to plan for the future, but you realize that the very concept of the future is different here. In your modern life, you plan for retirement for the next 5 years, for a career trajectory. Here, the future is a vague, misty concept that extends no further than the next harvest. Life is lived in a perpetual present, a cycle of seasons that repeats until it stops. There is no sense of progress, no belief that technology will make life easier for your children. In fact, the prevailing belief is often that the world is decaying, that the golden age is in the past, and that you are living in the twilight of humanity. This fatalism seeps into your bones, sapping your ambition, making the struggle to survive feel less like a challenge to be overcome and more like a penance to be endured. You look at the faces of your family in the firelight, and you see the physical evidence of this endurance, the toll that the lack of essential nutrients has taken on their bodies. You, with your modern upbringing, likely had a diet fortified with vitamins and minerals, giving you straight limbs and clear skin. Here, you are witnessing the slow, grinding effects of malnutrition. You might notice the bowed legs of a child who did not get enough sunlight and calcium, a sign of rickets that will leave them hobbled for life. You might see the bleeding gums and loose teeth of an adult suffering from mild, chronic scurvy, not enough to kill them, but enough to make every meal a misery. You might see the swollen goiters on the necks of those who live in areas with iodine-deficient soil, a disfigurement that is so common it is hardly remarked upon. Your own body is screaming for fresh fruit, for leafy greens, for a variety of proteins, but all you have is the dark bread and the gray pottage. You feel a lethargy settling deep in your muscles, a heaviness that is not just sleepiness, but the cellular exhaustion of a body running on empty. You are starving in slow motion, your body prioritizing the vital organs and shutting down the non-essential functions, leaving you dull-witted, cold, and irritable. As the fire finally burns down to a bed of ash, casting the room into total darkness, the silence returns, heavy and suffocating. You crawl back into the bed, the straw rustling, the bodies around you shifting for warmth, and you prepare for the final struggle of the day, the attempt to sleep. But sleep does not come easily. Your mind is racing with the anxieties of survival, with the fear of the fire, with the pain in your limbs, and with a profound, aching loneliness. You miss the world you left behind with a physical intensity that feels like grief. You miss the simple, taken-for-granted miracle of a hot shower. You miss the feeling of clean sheets. You miss the ability to turn on a light and banish the shadows. You miss the freedom to be an individual, to have thoughts and dreams that are not dictated by the struggle for bread. You realize that the simple life you might have romanticized is not simple at all. It is a complex, brutal, and unrelenting negotiation with death. It is a life where the margin for error is zero. One bad harvest, one infected cut, one fire, one harsh winter, and you are gone, erased from history without a trace, buried in an unmarked grave in a churchyard that will one day be plowed over. You lie there, staring into the dark, and you understand why the people of this time focus so fervently on the afterlife. It is not just piety. It is a desperate need to believe that this suffering has a purpose, that there is a place of rest and plenty waiting on the other side of the pain. Because if this is all there is, the mud, the cold, the hunger, the labor, then it is unbearable. And as your eyes finally close, shutting out the smoke-stained ceiling, you drift away not into a peaceful slumber, but into a defensive shutdown, a temporary escape from a reality that will be waiting for you, unchanged and unforgiving, the moment you open your eyes again. You have survived one day. But as the wind howls outside, rattling the shutters and whistling through the cracks in the walls, the question that haunts you is not how you survived today. It is whether you have the strength to do it again tomorrow. And the day after that. And every day for the rest of your short, hard life. This is the end of the day, but it is not the end of the struggle. The wheel turns, the sun will rise, and the Middle Ages will demand your labor once more. As the imaginary day fades completely into the recesses of the night, and you lie suspended in the dark, uncomfortable reality of the medieval dwelling, it is time to step back and consider the totality of the experience you have just endured. You have navigated a mere 16 hours of a life that your ancestors lived for centuries, and yet, in that short span, you have likely encountered a dozen distinct threats to your existence. You have breathed in smoke that blackened your lungs, drunk water that threatened your intestines, worked until your muscles failed, and lived under the constant, crushing weight of social and legal oppression. If you were to remain here, the probability of your long-term survival would drop precipitously with every passing week. The accumulated trauma on your body, the lack of nutritional diversity, and the inevitable exposure to pathogens would wear down even the strongest modern constitution. You would eventually succumb, not necessarily to a dramatic event like a sword stroke or the Black Death, but to the slow, quiet erosion of your biological defenses. A winter that is slightly too cold, a harvest that is slightly too lean, or a cut that is slightly too deep would be all it takes to extinguish the fragile flame of your life. And when that flame went out, the silence that followed would be absolute. This is perhaps the most sobering realization of all, the anonymity of your suffering. In the modern world, we document our lives incessantly, leaving digital footprints, photographs, and records that prove we existed, that we felt, that we mattered. But in the medieval world, the common person leaves almost no trace. You would be born, you would toil, you would suffer, and you would die, and the only record of your existence might be a single line in a parish register, or perhaps a tally mark in a lord's ledger indicating a paid fine or a owed tax. There would be no diaries to record your thoughts, no portraits to capture your face, no headstone to mark your grave after a generation or two had passed. You would simply vanish into the earth you spent your life tilling, your bones returning the nutrients to the soil that fed the Lord's grain. The village would continue, the seasons would cycle, and the memory of your struggle would be erased as completely as a footprint in the mud is washed away by the rain. This profound silence of the past is what we often fail to hear when we look at the ruins of castles or the illuminated pages of manuscripts. We see the stone walls that house the elite, the gold and the velvet, and we forget the millions of lives that were ground down to dust to build them. We forget the sheer, overwhelming physical effort required to sustain civilization in a time before machines. But now you can open your eyes. You can let the smoky, dark, crowded room dissolve. You can let the itch of the wool and the bite of the fleas fade away. You are back in a world where the temperature is controlled, where the water is clean, where the light is summoned at will, and where your body is your own. You are lying on a mattress designed for comfort, covered by fabrics that are soft and clean, in a room that is secure against the elements and the night. The silence around you is not the heavy, fearful silence of the medieval dark, but the peaceful quiet of a safe, modern space. You do not have to wake up at dawn to plow a field. You do not have to worry that a scratch on your hand will kill you. You do not have to fear that the winter will starve you. The anxieties you carry are of a different nature, complex in their own way, but removed from the raw, primal struggle for biological survival. As you drift towards your own sleep, real and restorative, you might feel a newfound appreciation for the mundane miracles of your daily life. The hum of the refrigerator, the warmth of the central heating, the softness of your pillow, these are not just conveniences. They are the triumphs of human ingenuity over the harsh baseline of nature. You have visited the past, and you have seen it for what it truly was, a test of endurance that you were never designed to pass. The medieval world was a forge that hammered humanity into hard, resilient shapes, but it was also a furnace that consumed countless lives in the process. You are the descendant of those who survived, the result of an unbroken chain of ancestors who managed, against all odds, to endure the cold, the hunger, and the dark long enough to pass life on to the next generation. But you do not have to carry their burden. You can rest. The mud is gone. The work is done. The night is safe. Sleep now in the luxury of the present, knowing that the long, hard day of history is behind you.